If, as 18th century English poet William Cowper wrote, variety's the very spice of life that gives it all its flavour, then a roundup of today's Parliament should have been a very spicy dish indeed. From hospital reform to American talk show host Oprah Winfrey, from taxation to Labor Party solidarity with an added dash of private members' bill from the coalition, and a pinch or two of Australia's first bloke. The political menu was a varied one. Here's political editor Heather Hewitt with today's smorgasbord.
It was his first official function hosted at the Lodge. A morning tea to mark Pink Ribbon Day and promote breast cancer awareness also offered guests the chance to observe how Tim Matheson is performing his duties as first bloke. He's certainly boned up on the history of his new home.
Billy Griffin's comrade is also American. She actually designed the lodge and all the furniture in 1929, so it has a really strong American Georgian feel.
This was a family affair. Through his daughter Sherry, there was personal experience of the tragedy of breast cancer as she recounted the death of her best friend's mother.
I think it shows how important it is for all of us, no matter what age, for women to make sure you do get your breasts checked.
Across town, Julia Gillard was also focused on the health front, visiting a physiotherapy clinic to set the tone for an announcement that would come later. This week, the government would introduce legislation to implement its hospital funding overhaul. Never mind that Western Australia is the only state that hasn't signed up to the deal.
Our understanding of Western Australia's position is they don't seek to stand in the way of the delivery of health reform for everyone else because they know everyone else has agreed to it, but they've got their own position about health reform for themselves.
Talks with the West Australian government continue on the deal that means the Commonwealth takes GST revenue from the states to fund 60% of hospital costs. There's nothing new about this. The details were stitched up months ago. But there's a pattern developing here. Calling a news conference to announce the legislation gives Julia Gillard and her ministers a forum to try to flush out the opposition.
This legislation delivers on the Commonwealth taking a greater role. This legislation delivers on national standards. These are things Mr Abbott has said in the past that he supports. It's time for him to stop screaming from the sidelines when he's got no solutions, get on board and support this legislation going through the Parliament.
The opposition isn't taking the bait, saying it will wait to see the legislation. The Prime Minister tried a similar strategy last week when she announced legislation to split the retail and wholesale arms of Telstra, a move she claimed was essential for the rollout of the national broadband network. The opposition isn't buying into that yet either, with Communications spokesman Malcolm Turnbull today introducing a private members' bill seeking a cost-benefit analysis of the NBN by the Productivity Commission.
It is simply an attempt to establish the facts, to provide Parliament with an appropriate level of financial understanding of this, the largest expenditure of taxpayers' funds on an infrastructure asset in our nation's history.
His colleague, Shadow Treasurer Joe Hockey, was more interested today in sticking to his demands for a debate on banking. In an address to the Australian Industry Group, he offered a more measured approach than his haphazard foray into the area last week. He bemoaned the domination of the four major banks.
We must have a debate on whether we have lost adequate banking competition in Australia. Not only have small players been squeezed, but international banks have become far less active. This, of course, further exposes Australian banks to domestic market volatility. Poor competition in selected markets and empty government rhetoric at the time of interest rate movements make Australians angry.
In a sign the government may be aware it's a message that hits home with voters, the Treasurer today dropped his ridicule of Joe Hockey's comments and renewed his warnings that the big banks shouldn't raise interest rates outside the Reserve Bank cycle.
Any argument from the banks, particularly in the context of their profit announcements that may come later this week, that somehow that a rise outside the Reserve Bank cycle is justified, is simply wrong. And I believe any rise outside the cycle would be very cynical from the major banks.
There's no one in government or the opposition who disagree with that. But there is a minor revolt in left-wing Labor ranks over contentious issues like gay marriage they feel they can't speak out on, while the Greens take the high moral ground.
It seems to be like having a political lobotomy. You know, your brain is just ripped apart. You can't think about things. You're not allowed to talk about things. And really, you know, we don't want zombie politicians. We want politicians that can get out there, stand up for the things that they think are important.
For my Labor Party colleagues, I've been very clear with them. I want our caucus to be a place of debate, of ideas generation. I want that to happen in caucus committees and in caucus itself. But we come from a political party that believes we are strengthened by being members of a team, and the way the team works is we have those discussions internally.
Not much room for movement there, so the left may instead have to content themselves with addressing serious matters of state, like US talk show host Oprah Winfrey's planned visit to Australia in December.
She said that her Australian visit would represent the ultimate adventure. That is exceptionally important because Oprah has been named by Forbes magazine as the most important celebrity in the world. That represents a major endorsement of the Australian tourism industry.
The House will come to order.
Cheers, mates. I'll get the accent better by the time I get there, OK?
Who knows, that could be cause for a parliamentary update from the minister in the new year.